Hello and welcome to COVID Conversations. I'm Kimberly Pierce Cartwright, News and Public Affairs Director at WNCU 90.7 FM. And we're using this platform to talk about how COVID-19 is affecting our world. My guest today is Browne Lewis, Dean of the NCCU School of Law. Welcome, Dean Lewis. How are you today?
Wonderful, and yourself?
I'm doing very well. And today, everybody, we'll talk about the North Carolina Central University School of Law's launch of the Social Justice and Racial Equality Initiative to provide educational outreach on social justice, anti-racism, and other equity concerns. Dean Lewis, the unfortunate intersection of COVID-19 and social justice issues hits hard in the African American community. Will you talk to me about that intersection and where African Americans find themselves in this very critical time?
Thanks, I sure will. Well, there's been a lot of focus on the health consequences of COVID on the Black community because we've been disproportionately impacted. But there are other things beyond health. One thing is food insecurity. A lot of Black neighborhoods don't have grocery stores, so people are having to take the bus to buy groceries. And now in a COVID environment, you can see how dangerous it is to have to get on a crowded bus to go to a grocery store. And some people now are just deciding to feed their kids on the dollar menu at the fast food in their neighborhood, as opposed to trying to maneuver the bus system to get to a grocery store. Another one is employment. A lot of Black people are in jobs like CNAs that are not highly paid but are considered to be critical. So they've had to continue to work and to be exposed. And those people are not given PPEs the way that doctors and nurses are. And so some people feel that they can't get to quit the job. They can't ask for any kind of COVID accommodations. Same thing in housing. The moratorium on evictions has been lifted in most states. So now people are being evicted. There are stories about people who go to the hospital and diagnosed with COVID, come home, have been recovering for a few days, and then get an eviction notice, and their things are moved outside on the sidewalk, and they don't have anything, any place to go. And homeless shelters, as you would think, in a COVID environment, have limited spaces. So the COVID-19 pandemic is adversely impacting Black people on so many levels.
So I want you to talk to me about your social justice advocates. How long has North Carolina Central University been educating them? And if you could give a definition of what that is, social justice advocate.
So for about 8 years, we've had a certificate program in addition to the JD program. And the certificate program is Justice in the Practice of Law. And it has a social justice concentration to it. And in the social justice concentration, students study environmental racism. They study food discrimination, they study housing discrimination, and they take additional classes beyond their regular law school classes to teach them how to advocate for people, low-income Black and brown people in those spaces. And so we've been doing that as a course for, like I said, about 8 years. Now what we're trying to do is go beyond just our law school students and start advocating anybody who's interested in starting a social justice movement. And what makes somebody an effective social advocate is to have an organization around a goal. And we've seen in, for example, Occupy Wall Street, when there's not a definitive goal, the movement doesn't really accomplish much and it doesn't go as far as it should be. And what we want to take is all this energy and passion that young people have and show them how to use it in an effective way to advocate for change.
So will you give me an overview of the School of Law's Virtual Justice Project? What is that?
Well, it's something, if you think of telemedicine, it's something like telelaw, because we have a telepresence room downstairs, and we've had it since about 2010. And what we've done is about 38 locations throughout the state. We've donated media links So what happens is somebody in a county in Eastern North Carolina can go to a public library, and we have in public libraries and churches mostly, and can go into one of those and be able to have contact with us here at the law school. And at the law school, we have something called Know Your Rights, when we bring in not just our law students, but local attorneys to do workshops on how to address eviction issues, how to prepare wills and estate planning documents, how to do power of attorneys, and empower people and do a step-by-step workshop. So people who don't have an attorney or don't have the money to get an attorney will be able to do the basic things themselves.
So it sounds like you guys are really, really busy at law school working on these different initiatives. And right now, will you tell me about the law school's 4-part initiative and partnerships with the School of Business and the Department of Criminal Justice here at North Carolina Central University? And I'm very much interested in a plan to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on people of color as one of your first projects.
Definitely. So what we decided to do was to pull together the component parts that we've had for years and to package it in a way that's going to have a holistic approach to the elimination of racism and the application of social justice. So we're going to have a social justice lecture series, and a part of that will be the conversation about COVID-19 and the impacts. And we're going to work with our nursing school to look from the health literacy perspective. So give people accurate information about how do you get COVID? How do you avoid getting it? What do you do when you do have it? Because there's so many misinformation out in the Black community. It is not so much, it's the message and the messenger. People who are telling us about it are people that Black community may not trust. So we're going to bring people who look like us, and let them know that it's a real thing and it's not just these conspiracy theories that you're hearing in the community. And another thing we're doing, because we're also a voting precinct, so in September we're going to have a conversation using our virtual justice project on voting suppression and how do you vote in a COVID environment. Because that's going to be a big thing, because in-person voting in some jurisdictions, as you know, there was then an outbreak of COVID-19. So how do we get people to the poll, encourage them to vote, and let them know that they can safely vote? And how the people who can safely vote, how do we get the states to, because some states are reluctant to have voting virtually. How do we get people to know that we have technology available to do that? So to have those type of conversations. With our business school, we're going to be giving a workshop on entrepreneurship and focusing on economic injustice, where it's so difficult for Black owned businesses to survive because they don't have the resources and they don't know how to do things like create a business plan. How do you leverage marketing? How do you make sure you have enough inventory? How do you work on your customer service models? So our business school has the capability to do those things, and so we're going to partner with them. With our criminal justice department, we're going to look at our juvenile justice issues. We're going to look at how do we stop the from high school to prison pipeline? How do we shift those students and get them into college as opposed to the prisons? And that's going to tie into our social justice impact center, which is going to do things that impact in the community. A few projects. One is our social justice pipeline, where we're going to work with high school students to get them into college. We're going to work with them from 9th grade all the way up until 12th grade. They don't have to come here, but they have to go to some college, someplace other than prison. We're going to work on looking at the public school system and what can we do in this COVID environment to keep the students safe, and also to address the unfair discipline that some of our Black and Brown students get at the hands of the public school system, and try to do some type of a review board that consists of retired educators and community leaders to make sure that the punishment that the schools fit the crime, and so that we have some type of due process in place for our students in the public school system. And the other two components, one is a research institute. And the reason I want to have a research center is because when we identify problems, a lot of people ignore problems because they say you don't have the statistics to back them up. You know, when we talk about legal deserts, where there are some places in the country where there are no attorneys, people don't believe that unless you can put the statistics. So we want to be a place where there's research and there's data that other institutes similar to what we're doing will have the data to support the claims that they're making in identifying the problems. And then we're also going to, last thing we want to do is a training center, because there are different situations where people will say, well, the reason why we don't have Black and brown people who are executive directors of nonprofit organizations, because we can't find qualified people. And we hear that in a lot of contexts when there are not enough of us, they can't find qualified people. So what we want to do when we hear that is say, we're going to have certificates and train people to be qualified. And so you will have to hire those people or come up with another reason why you're not doing it.
Dean Lewis, can you give me maybe a timeline that all of this is supposed to happen in within the next year, within the next 2 years? What are we looking at?
Well, we're looking at it breaking out in different parts. And so, because we're also working to partner with community people, and so we're bringing that into play. So our first step is we're creating an advisory board to make sure that all the relevant stakeholders are together and can brainstorm what we need to do to be effective. And so the things that will go online quickly, as early this fall, it's a lecture series, because we already have the capacity for that. And then the other ones this fall and into the spring, we will be building relationships to identify a key set of problems, knowing that we can't address our issues, but there are certain issues that we can address. We're going to look at a priority is going to be trying to figure out how we can help local community organizations to acquire land to create community gardens and things like that. So we're looking at a time frame of getting the center up and running within a year or two. Because it's an initiative now, but ultimately it's going to be an institute. And for that, we have to go through the systems processes. So that should take a year or so. But in the meantime, we're going to put component parts in place, the right people in place, looking for the right funding, looking for the right staffing. And so and it is not just going to be a pie in the sky vision. We have a plan to make sure it comes to fruition.
Well, it sounds very exciting. And I'm sure you're excited very much about students coming back for this school year at the School of Law. How are you guys preparing them to come back, or preparing for them to come back in a COVID environment?
It's exciting and scary at the same time, because I've been dean for a month, and I'm deaning, like I said, in the age of Corona. So we made the decision to go completely online. But we also know that means we have to keep the building open, because some students don't have reliable internet at home. Some students don't have safe or good places to study at home or to take classes at home. So we're having a system, how you do in a restaurant where you have a reservation, like my table. We have that system in place. So what students do from home is they can reserve a seat. And once all the seats for that day are gone, we have about 124 seats in the building. And once the seats are gone, then the students will not be able to get in. We have temperature kiosks at the beginning of the building. Students have to do a COVID survey before they enter the building. And after they get their temperature taken, then we have hand sanitizer machines throughout. We have the sign is for 6 feet apart. We have stairways. You can only go up one side or down the other. So we're following CDC protocols and also the university's protocol to make the building as safe as possible. Because even though we will not be having classes in the building, we anticipate that we have a lot of people in the building, because as I mentioned previously, we're a voting precinct. So we're going to have voters in the building, and we're going to have students in the building. So it's going to be a lot to maneuver. And from a mental health perspective, we have a licensed counselor on staff, because what we're finding is that students are worried about coming into the building, but then they're also worried about taking classes online, especially first-year students, because some have never done it before. It can be quite scary because law school, under any circumstances, can be stressful. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that they have the mental health counseling and the capacity to address the anxieties. And once we can calm the anxieties, we have academic support every day in the building. We have tutors in the building, office hours in the building. So we're doing as much in the building as we can to make sure that the students are getting something similar to what they would have done in an in-person law school environment.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. It seems like you've gotten so many wonderful things in store for not only the law school, but the community at large as well. And welcome to North Carolina Central University as the Dean of the School of Law.
Thank you.
Yes. Any final things that you'd like to convey to our listeners, our viewers?
Well, we have a clinical program. So because we have a clinical program, we have a lot of people in the community coming into the building. And we just want them to know that we're open. And people, if you have legal needs, our clinical programs are open, up and operational. And you can come to the building to make sure that you're getting those needs addressed.
Thank you, Dean Lewis, and good luck to you.
Thank you. And thank you so very much.
You're welcome. And thank you for listening and watching Covert Conversations here on WNCU 90.7 FM. I'm Kimberly Pierce Cartwright. Until next time, take care.